Here from 30 Rock, and it is with great pleasure that I'm able to be part of today. Today being a very important day for National ACE, welcoming you back to the second day of the AAPI Strong Legislative Conference as we connect AAPI business leaders and entrepreneurs with elected officials and policymakers in a bipartisan effort to influence positive legislative change. Now, today's conference is dedicated to our AAPI Strong initiatives as we find our voice to make a difference and impact in our community. These past 2 years, we've all been watching it very closely. It's certainly been a challenge to our small businesses and others as they slowly recover from COVID-19 and the pandemic, as well as on top of all of that, the anti-Asian hate phenomenon and the violence that has resulted from it. It is going to take, and it goes without saying, I'm sure you all would agree, all of us together and outside our communities working together to overcome all of these challenges. So we cannot thank you all for joining us here for this gathering on the second day and this first day and both days for that matter to fight to become stronger as we work together. To help us kick off today's conversation on AAPI Strong and finding our AAPI voice is our moderator, Susan Jin Davis. Susan has 30 years of experience in the telecommunications, media, entertainment, and technology industries. She currently serves as the Social Impact Officer for Al Roker Entertainment. So that makes two people that I know well, Susan Jin Davis and Al Roker, who I've had a lot of laughs standing next to. Susan is also a well-experienced and well-respected executive in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which makes her the perfect moderator for today's conversation. I consider her a fantastic person. We share a lot of parallel journeys. I love her for a lot of the things that she's done for our community and others as a leader and as a mentor. I appreciate and love her more for her commitment to her family and being an amazing caregiver for her father. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Susan Jin Davis.
Thank you, Richard, for that generous introduction. I'm excited to kick off National ACE's second day of convening on the important topic of finding our AAPI voice. AAPIs have contributed greatly to the success of this country and have a legacy of positive contributions and impacts in the United States. We are the fastest growing population in the U.S. and continue to grow our value. Yet we have limited visibility and are underrepresented when it comes to leadership, policy, and decision-making. We are often overlooked and invisible when it comes to conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion, even though we are underrepresented minorities. Now, with the recent alarming rise in acts of violence, discrimination, and prejudice against AAPIs that have swept the nation, we are further marginalized and targeted for who we are. This is all to say that now is the time for us to rise up and raise our voices so that we are elevated as a community, engaged in the important policy decisions of the day, chosen as leaders in all areas of influence, and advocating for a more equitable and just society. National ACE is among the organizations leading the charge in elevating our community and strengthening our voices, and we welcome you all to this very important day of learning, partnering, and acting towards the goals of creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive society. Enjoy the day.
Tune in tomorrow for a special fireside chat with Bill Amata and Administrator Isabella Casillas Guzman from the U.S. Small Business Administration.
Please welcome Deborah Byers, America's sector leader with Ernst & Young.
Hello, everyone. It is such an honor to be part of National ACE's inaugural AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. My name is Deborah Byers. I'm a partner at Ernst & Young and America's industry leader. As you know, this last year and a half has been particularly difficult for the AAPI business community. COVID-19 pandemic coupled with a sharp spike in anti-Asian hate and violence has really forced AAPI business owners to make some difficult decisions. But I'm really, really excited and truly honored to be here with two amazing members of Congress to discuss these important topics and the congressional efforts underway to uplift the AAPI community during these challenging times. First up, we have Senator Mazie Hirono. She represents the great state of Hawaii and is the first Asian American woman ever elected to the United States Senate. Senator Hirono was born in Japan, was elected to Hawaii's House of Representatives in 1980, and later became the state's lieutenant governor. She served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 2007 to 2013, and has been a United States Senator since 2013. So we're very honored, and we really appreciate you joining us today.
Aloha.
And then next we have Congresswoman Grace Meng, who was elected to Congress in 2012, and she represents the great state of New York's 6th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. She's the first and only Asian American member of Congress from the state of New York. Congresswoman Meng is a member of the powerful House Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for funding every federal agency, program, and project within the United States government. Certainly incredibly impactful. She also serves as the first vice chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, which many of you may know as KPAC. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Grace.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's just jump into really some of the topics that we have today, and maybe both Senator Hirono and Congresswoman Meng, you could comment. Earlier this year, Congress passed your bill, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, in response to what we were seeing in the way that AAPI hate during the pandemic. And so today, can you speak to how this bill has changed the response of the federal government to hate crimes? And really, what is this impact beyond really the scope of just the pandemic as we come through, what is right now a fairly bumpy recovery, but eventually hopefully a strong recovery for the community?
First of all, thank you very much for having both of us on and to continue to shine a light on the concern of hate crimes targeting AAPIs. And our bill was really, I would say, an important step in having Congress, for once, saying we stand with the AAPI community on this, and we need to establish a way for us to get data on the incidents of hate crimes as well as hate incidents. Very, very underreported. And so Grace and I worked really hard to get bipartisan support for this measure. But as I say, it is the beginning of a process whereby the community needs to learn about these kinds of crimes based on xenophobia, racism, hatred, and to begin to take the steps to encourage reporting, and then that there are all kinds of other things that we can be doing to continue to prevent, and when they occur, to basically prosecute these as crimes if they rise to the level of crimes.
And once again, thank you, Deborah, for the introduction. And I also want to thank Shailene Tong and National ACE and the whole team for once again hosting an important panel to discuss some of these pressing issues that affect our community nationwide. I'm always honored to be in the presence of Senator Mazie Hirono, and so proud and thankful for her leadership and mentorship for so many of us in politics and beyond. Racially motivated harassment of Asian Americans is a long-standing issue in the U.S. But as we all know, since COVID-19 began, or even before, incidents have been nonstop and rising. We have all seen videos and footage of members of our APA community encountering racist attacks, from verbal abuse to physical assault. And our Hate Crimes Act bolstered the federal government's response to the rise of hate crimes by doing a few things, and designating an individual at the Department of Justice to expedite the review of hate crimes. It also brings federal agencies together with our local community-based organizations to raise awareness of these crimes and incidents, to support the creation of online reporting mechanisms in multiple languages, to empower local communities and individuals to report these incidents. Most of these incidents don't necessarily get reported to the federal government. And as you all know, without accurate data and statistics, we can't find a complete solution. But I do want to echo what Senator Hirono said, that this is an important step, but it is only a first step, only one step as we continue to combat anti-Asian violence. There is much more that needs to be done, but at the very least, we wanted to make sure that we were passing this bill, and thankful for the attention, again, that Congress and President Biden paid to our community.
Yeah, you know, as both of you were speaking, I mean, there were two things. One, this is not something new. This is something that has been in our communities, sadly, for a long time, and the transparency mechanisms and the tools that were provided in the bill. And you talked about that this is a beginning, and you talked about the local communities and empowering them. Perhaps, you know, either of you, Senator or Congresswoman, could talk about what are some of those tools, because, you know, these are local issues. They differ, you know, across the country. Both in scope and the frequency, if you will. And so what are some of the tools that we should begin to see in our local communities, state and local agencies? How are they empowered?
A lot of the emphasis of the hate crime bill, it is with the local and state law enforcement, as well as the communities, because so much of the prevention and the reporting, of course, relies on individuals coming forward. And there are a lot of people out there who don't even know where to report. Hence, they need to set up an easy reporting system. And there are states, there are a number of states that do not even have hate crimes legislation. And so often in those communities, things that we would consider to be hate crimes based on racist or xenophobia, those kinds of impetuses, they don't even get reported as such. So there is information that needs to get out, and the AAPI community consists of people who speak many languages, something like 300-400 languages. So obviously, any of the information that is going out to these, particularly to community organizations that are really an important part of a community coming forward to report, has to be in different languages. So that's something that we've been pushing. But there's an entity called the Community Relations Service within the Department of Justice, very under-resourced, but they are there to promote information, et cetera, and they have a brochure that they put out. And part of what we can do is to have people access this brochure. The brochure contains things such as there can be different ways that the community can call attention to hate crimes occurring in the community. They can have press conferences or rallies to have everyone in the community know that this is an issue and what they can do. Another suggestion in this brochure was that, particularly for schools and campuses, to have a way for people to respond to these kinds of crimes and to report these kinds of crimes. So there's some very specific to-do action items in this brochure, but I think we need to help spread the word that this kind of information is available.
Yeah, the bill was passed recently, and so we are still awaiting guidance and details on how our law will be fully implemented. But a lot of the issues do come from state and local governments and law enforcement jurisdictions where they simply don't have enough resources and data to help combat hate crimes. Many jurisdictions across the country report zero bias incidents or hate crimes in a given year. And so if we are acting like nothing's happening, it's a lot harder to provide solutions to solve the problem. And so that's why our legislation requires the Department of Justice to issue guidance for how the average person can even report these incidents and crimes in multiple languages, to collect that data, and like Maisie said, to expand public education campaigns to empower local communities. We've all heard stories where we know that the numbers of stories that we've heard are not comprehensive. We know that there are many more that have not been reported. And so we want to make sure that reporting is going on. And so our legislation helps to provide tools to our local and state agencies that allows the data to be shared so that appropriate actions can be taken to address these crimes and incidents more effectively.
Deborah, I'd like to mention that one important part of the bill that we really worked with the Department of Justice was to include the reporting of incidents, because hate crimes, those are crimes such as assault, etc. But a lot of the manifestation or a lot of the attacks are verbal attacks. They may not rise to the level of an assault. And that's why the Department of Justice originally had some concerns about using the term incidents. But I said you would not get a lot of reporting if we don't include incidents. And to me, the importance of incidents is it shows the attitudes in a community, which should lead to some just discussion and work on education. And maybe the schools need to play a role in making sure that students understand that racism, bias are not acceptable. But it should lead to a number of approaches to prevent these kinds of actions or acts taken by people who need to be educated.
Well, and that's a really important distinction that you just made, and important that the definition of incident, but really around education, because we, at our firm, when all of this was happening, we had a number of sessions and where we talked about this, but it really was, we need to educate our broader constituency, not just talk about it within the AAPI community, but the community at large. And so powerful for you to say that. You talked about the legislation, and it sounds like there's more work to be done to really get that moving. It was just passed in May, so we need to continue to support all of those activities. But beyond the legislation, you already mentioned education in the schools and other ideas. What else can the communities do right now and how can we as a AAPI community and small business owners, corporations, what can we do beyond that legislation as it's starting to gather data and gather momentum? What beyond that can be done, or suggestions that you have that we should take away?
I'd say sessions like this are important, and then the community coming together. One of the things that the corporations can do is to do bystander training, because we all saw the videos of people getting harmed or beaten up and bystanders standing there doing nothing. And so I know that there are companies, I hope yours is one of them, to engage in bystander training, so that when we see something like this happening, that we know what to do, or without endangering ourselves.
Yeah, I have seen so much of an appetite for bystander training and tips. And, I think that sessions like that and workshops have really been in demand, which is great. And so, yes, this legislation is just one step. And one way that I have seen our allies step up in various fields, including the private sector and corporations. Some of it's really simple and basic, just making sure that our community is being acknowledged within the company, that employees are being acknowledged. Events that your firm, Deborah, had are super important as well, because Asian Americans have really been often seen as invisible, right? Whether it's in our history textbooks or whether it's in the budget books of philanthropy, corporate giving. There's so many times, so many rooms where I'm sure I can speak for the senator too, where we may be in a room and Asian Americans aren't even acknowledged, right? And so this is really important for our community, that we are being seen and we are being heard. And I think that one thing that I've recognized as we've all spent time this past year speaking to, let's say, employee resource groups at companies, I think it's really incumbent upon us to provide and to come up with opportunities for us to work with other communities too. Our legislation was largely pushed by our APA community around the country, but it was also supported by many other communities and groups. And I think that that's one of the good things that's come out of this past year and a half, is that we have seen our friendships and our coalitions with other communities strengthened. And so, you know, I'll say to someone at an Asian American employee resource group, you know, you should participate in the events of your employee resource group, but you know what? Try to be supportive of other employee resource groups as well. And how do we strengthen that coalition so that we are mutually helping each other? I think that there is, you know, so much room for growth, even in a diverse city like New York. Our various diverse communities too often just walk and work side by side, but we aren't necessarily working together enough in an effective way. And so I think that that's something that we can all find ways to do going forward.
I think that's... Also, it's not limited to reporting of crimes and incidents against the APIs. It includes the crimes and incidents targeting any other racial group. And we already know that Muslims have been targeted in our country. Certainly, more recently, the Jewish community, Jewish businesses have been targeted. And so all of these kinds of experiences or incidents or crimes should be reported under this bill.
No, that's great. It's very inclusive. And we talked about this at our firm, which is it's really, and we worked very closely with our Black professional Latinx groups as well, because as you say, they're very common issues. This is not about highlighting one particular cohort, but it's really about the issue of hate and bigotry, as you said, and bias. So really, really important things that you are bringing to the forefront. The bystander training is interesting. I'd love to see more of that. And I do think the allies, what you mentioned on the allies, my sister had an incident and she did get an ally that stepped up at a store. And it completely made her feel, she was very shook up, but it made her feel better and it diffused the situation. So I do think that that's so powerful and it's so simple. So we talked a little bit about what companies can do as well. And I know that there's so many great organizations across the country, whether chamber organizations or civic organizations. And as we really try to work through these issues together as a group, what can they do? Any suggestions for those? I mean, I'm in all of the big cities, major cities have chamber groups that, really are focused on businesses, but this is really important, this human capital issue.
Well, to recognize that anytime there's discrimination, that it impacts all of us, and we're really in this together to fight these kinds of actions. I commend your chamber for stepping up in support of Mr. Syed as the Deputy Administrator of the Small Business Administration. He has been attacked basically erroneously for being for saying things as a Muslim. He was a member of a Muslim organization that put out a statement that he had nothing to do with, and there are various other attacks against him. He's very well qualified, and we certainly need a deputy administrator at SBA as they have more and more responsibilities in this time of the pandemic and all of the impact on small businesses. And so thank you very much for stepping up and saying this man needs to be confirmed, but the Republicans have been boycotting at least 4 times now that the Small Business Committee, on which I sit, have tried to take a vote on moving him to the floor of the Senate for confirmation. So this is the kind of things that happens all the time, unfortunately, in the Senate, where there will be efforts to block a lot of minority people from being confirmed as judges. That is happening a lot. There is certainly a pattern of not wanting to support minority women for judges or minority people for judges, and other kinds of confirmation roadblocks that the Republicans have put forth. So it's important when you folks recognize this kind of thing happening to step forward. All the ethnic chambers can do that and to share with each other, here's what's happening to a Muslim person, and we may be an AAPI organization, but this is something we can speak up on. So that's one thing, to share the information and to make suggestions on how we can come together and send a unified message.
Well, I think that our local chambers of commerce and small business organizations, AAPI and others, should do what ACE has been doing across the country, trying to convene us on virtual events like this to talk about and to highlight the issue, raising awareness with companies and leaders who are not necessarily Asian American, but just making sure that these issues and our community are still on the forefront, even after Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, because oftentimes we're just forgotten about and dropped beyond May. But our small businesses have really suffered. I mean, they were really the first ones impacted even before COVID hit us. I remember here in New York, before America got the first case of reported COVID-19, people were already avoiding our small businesses. They thought, like, if you went to a Chinese restaurant, you might catch COVID. So they've really suffered 2 crises, economic one and a racist one. And so Congress, the House and the Senate worked to pass legislation, for example, to provide restaurant grants, small business grants and loans. And so I think that our small business associations really need to continue to work to get the word out about helpful programs. We have organizations, agencies that directly help small businesses in many of our districts, and to make sure that our community, small businesses, know about those resources, because they don't always know about them. And it's a constant challenge for us to get out the word. Nearly 3/5 of AAPI businesses missed out on critical COVID-19 relief assistance, either because they didn't have the information or accurate information, or because there wasn't enough language access. And so, we will continue to push for that, but to really get the word out about existing resources, I think would be very helpful to them as well.
No, that's great advice, especially as the economy recovers. I mean, we need to be part of that recovery and growth. And I know, as I said, my dear sisters, they're small business owners, and when PPP came out, thank you, for that. I was able to help them access that, but they said that there wasn't a lot of information trickling into their community at all. So, or they were afraid to do it or didn't think they qualified. So that is great advice. I know both of you have a bit of a hard stop, but anything else to add here? I mean, this is hopefully, as you say, it's not just like it's May, Asian Heritage Month. Oh, we had the bill and we don't talk about it more. How do we keep this conversation going? What can we as individuals do as business members of the business community? How can we continue to have this message? I think this convening concept is important to get the word out.
We know that just because a bill passed, that doesn't mean that everybody's hearts and minds are now eliminated. Racism is no longer an issue. Racism is never far below the surface in our country. So really all of us should be committed and eternally vigilant, because it doesn't take much for racist actions to be taken against any particular group. We know that from the history of our country, right? And so the Chinese Exclusion Act and the internment of Japanese Americans in World War II, the Muslim ban, these are all actions that were taken because of some external factors that came into play, but it didn't take very long for these actions that harmed minority groups like ours to take effect. And so eternal vigilance. Don't forget that this is a continuing issue in our country, and there are things that we need to continue to do our part. And let me just mention that, one of the groups that did bystander training, which I thought was fantastic, is UPS. They have thousands of drivers all over our neighborhoods and communities, so they train their drivers to notice things. So that I thought was really fantastic. I just wanted to add that as a very specific example of what a company can do.
That's great.
That's great. I didn't even know that. And that's certainly a good example for others to follow. And I will say, I have been so heartened. Honestly, oftentimes, a lot of these issues that we work on prior to COVID, it's kind of lonely sometimes. It's like we work in a small, somewhat enclosed network of AAPI, elected officials and nonprofit and activists. But sometimes it doesn't feel like Asian American leaders in other sectors are paying enough attention. And I will say that I'm really heartened, like what Senator Hirono just said about UPS and what, Deborah's talking about, your firm. We felt an increased surge of interest and support from leaders in other sectors beyond the political and nonprofit worlds. And that honestly has meant the world to me, and I'm sure to many others. We passed this important legislation, but that's not the end of our needs, right? We have to find out, and everyone has different interest areas and different skills. But ask yourselves, what are you doing to help our community progress? What are you doing as an individual, as an entity, to help make sure that our community is on more equal footing compared to other communities? And what are you doing to strengthen the coalitions between the AAPI community and others? We need to advocate for more, for example, funding for our local community groups, for mental health support, for our APA history to be included in our textbooks, more funding for our groups from foundations, from corporate giving, et cetera. So there are lots of things that we can ask for, and we are happy to share our opinions, but we need to make sure that we're still advocating. Just because May's over, even if the violence decreases, we should still be asking and advocating.
Yes. I love that. We don't all have to be advocates, but we need to be advocates and or activists, but we need to be advocates and raise our voice. All right. Well, thank you both for really an enlightening conversation, and I just feel so optimistic about things. I know things are turning the corner, a lot of work to do. Thank you both so much. We're very honored to have you join us, and I look forward to speaking with both of you again or seeing you on stage at another venue.
Thank you, and everybody stay safe, be kind, and again, thank you to the Chamber and you, Deborah. Aloha.
Coming up later, special remarks from the chair of the Senate Small Business Committee, Senator Ben Cardin.
Please welcome Susie Felch Malahifa'u, Executive Director of Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources.
Mahalo and welcome. My name is Susie Felch Malohifa'o, and I'm the CEO and President of Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources, known as PICTAR in Utah. PICTAR is an asset-based community organization where it is our mission to help Utah's Pacific Islander communities flourish through providing culturally relevant resources, opportunities, and services to build alliances and bridge communities. PICTAR, in collaboration with various community partners, is focused on providing support in economic development, violence prevention, and cultural preservation. I have been a longtime friend and affiliate member of National ACE because they support our goals to empower Pacific Islanders to sustainably build alliances and grow capacity in our Pacific Island business communities. Today, I have the distinct honor to introduce Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States, an Asian American and Pacific Islander Senior Liaison, Ms. Erica Moritsugu. Erica was appointed by President Joe Biden in April 2021 to serve as Deputy Assistant to the President and Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Island Senior Liaison. At the White House, Erica supports the administration on a wide array of the president's priorities and engages with American, Asians, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander communities and leaders on important issues such as advancing safety, justice, inclusion, and opportunity for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities through a whole of government approach to racial justice. Her past government service includes serving as the Assistant Secretary for Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations at the Department of Housing and Urban Development under the leadership of Secretary Julian Castro in the Obama administration, and was the first ever Senate Deputy Legislative Director at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. On Capitol Hill, she was a senior representative of Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, Senator Daniel Keakaka of Hawaii, and at the Senate Democratic Policy Committee under Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada. In the nonprofit sector, Erica managed two teams, the National Partnership for Women and Families for Economic Justice and Congressional Relations, advancing workforce and health policies focused through a gender equity and race equity lens. Erica has also led the Government Relations, Advocacy, and Community Engagement team at the Anti-Defamation League, a leading anti-hate organization. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Erica L. Moritsugu.
Aloha, y'all. It's a pleasure to join you at the National ACE Legislative Conference this year. I want to thank you for inviting me to make remarks ahead of your conversation today on diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that promote Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander business and economic inclusivity. I'm serving in a historic first ever role created in the White House as the senior liaison to the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. And it's an honor to serve in this role, to execute on our President and Vice President's longstanding commitment to our community, and to grow and build on that commitment. To be the voice in the White House, lifting up AA and NHPIs and making sure that the richness and diversity of our communities are no longer invisible. And also to make sure that the impacts of the administration's policies are inclusive of all of our communities and communicated to all of our communities. I coordinate closely with Howard O. at the White House Office of Public Engagement, which includes the National Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander organizations, and also with the White House Initiative on AA and NHPIs, which has a reinvigorated and expanded mandate and led by Crystal Ka'ai, the new executive director of the initiative. President Biden and Vice President Harris have made DEIA a priority in this administration. In June, President Biden and Vice President Harris expanded contracting opportunities for underserved small businesses across the country with a new goal of increasing the share of contracts going to small disadvantaged businesses by 50% by 2026. This translates into an additional $100 billion to SDBs over a 5-year period. Systemic barriers have held back communities in regards to contracting, and the Biden-Harris administration is setting the example and moving toward inclusion of all communities in our contracting process. In June, the president also made DEIA a priority in the administration when he issued an executive order advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility throughout the federal government. This order further advances equity within the federal government and establishes that it is the policy of this administration to cultivate a workforce that draws from the full diversity of the nation. As the nation's largest employer, the federal government must be a model for diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility, where all employees are treated with dignity and respect. The federal government should have a workforce that reflects the diversity of the American people. A growing body of evidence demonstrates that diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible workplaces yield higher performing organizations. And if you look at the president's administration, you can see that he's committed to building the most diverse administration in history, but he's also doing it both in terms of the White House staff and our presidential appointees across the federal government. First, with the selection of Kamala Harris as his vice president. She's the first Indian American and first Asian American elected to the office. And in the White House, we have 17% of White House staff who are Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, surpassing the 7% share of our national census population. And throughout the executive branch, we have Asian American leaders of entire agencies. Ambassador Catherine Tai, our cabinet member and U.S. Trade Representative. Kiran Ahuja, the Director of the Office of Personnel Management. Lena Khan, Chair of the Federal Trade Commission. Rohit Chopra, Director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Julie Su, the Deputy Secretary at Labor, Vanita Gupta and Todd Kim at DOJ. Gina Ortiz-Jones was recently sworn in as the Undersecretary to the Air Force, and on, not to mention our judges and leaders who are awaiting Senate action to confirm them. We have Raul Gupta to lead ONDCP and other nominees waiting for committee action. Dilaur Saeed at the Small Business Administration, David Weigio at HUD, Atul Gawande at USAID, and ambassadors Chris Liu and Chantel Wong. We were also so thrilled with the recent Senate confirmation of Florence Pan as the first Asian American woman to serve as a federal district court judge in Washington, D.C. Bottom line here is that the president values diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility and is providing the moral leadership to model this in his administration. Look, my job is to promote the administration's agenda and the president's vision and values. With his Build Back Better agenda, we're supporting the engines of growth in our economy by supporting our small businesses. We're lowering costs for all working families, and we're making long-term, long overdue infrastructure investments, including in our clean energy grid and expanding broadband access. We look forward to working with you all and all of our community partners as we move forward to a more just and prosperous future together. Mahalo for the opportunity to join you.
Join us tomorrow for an exciting chat with the co-founder of YouTube, Stephen Chen. Please welcome the Social Impact Officer at Al Roker Entertainment, Ms. Susan Jin Davis.
Welcome to this conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm excited to have this dialogue with Ying McGuire and Tracy Doi. So let's begin the conversation with a very basic question, and that is, please share with us what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you and your organization and why they are important. Tracy, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Susan. So when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, on a personal level, it's really about bringing your best self to everywhere you go and feeling free to be able to do that. Because certainly within the workplace, we have found that it just increases engagement. People bring their best ideas and they can feel like they are making a big difference within the workplace. And as Toyota moves towards a mobility environment, that's so key. Really, as a corporation, our goal is to weave diversity, equity, inclusion into everything that we do. So that is across our supply chain, right? It's with our dealers. It's being cognizant of what our customers are looking for. It's also ensuring that we are giving back to the society in the way that we best can. And so this has been a journey that we've been on for multiple years. We've gotten advice from our diversity advisory board, experts from all different industries. We've really tried to improve in our efforts from recruiting, supportive of our suppliers, which is why the partnership with National ACE has been so key to be able to do what we can for entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Thank you, Tracy. And I love the use of the word embedding DEI. And Ying, in your new position, I mean, clearly embedding DEI is a very important concept for you. So can you talk about your definition of DEI?
Oh, sure. The what piece, I think it's create a community, a workplace of belonging. People feel welcomed, respected, and supported and valued, and really drive fairness for all. An environment that inspires creativity and innovation, a place that everyone in the organization that has the opportunity to share their ideas and perspectives, and that they can reach full potential.
And innovation really does require that we have a lot of different points of view at the table, that we are hearing all kinds of voices. So that's really important. Now, in my work in this area, there's such thing as increasing the numbers on the one hand, right? We want to make sure that we have a lot of different voices, a lot of different people at the table. But I think the bigger challenge is, how do we make environments that are inclusive, that are equitable? So you can have the numbers, but you may not have the E and the I. So my next question to you is, what has been the most challenging aspect of creating that kind of environment, an environment that's truly open, that's inclusive, that's really fair for everyone? What's your how-to approach? Give us some advice about what's worked for you in your impressive careers.
I would say that this is something where, I don't know about you, Ying, this is one of those areas where I don't think before we talked about, post the George Floyd incident, which was so tragic. I just don't think we had a situation where you felt like we would talk about race, we would talk about social injustice in the workplace as openly. And so one of the challenges is really creating a safe space where people feel like team members can open up and really share their experiences and not feel like they're hiding a component of their lives, right? And so I think one of the things that I really worked with our employee resource groups is to open up safe spaces where people could have an open forum. So we did that in small groups. I like to do virtual coffees. In this world with the pandemic, it's even that much more complex, right? Because you used to be able to just call a few folks together, or you'd just be in the break room and could have that casual conversation. Now I'm more intentional of trying to figure out, how do you draw people into that conversation? And that could be holding a stand-up meeting, a virtual stand-up meeting, where you can have a guest speaker come in. We did open forums with inviting a hosting of one of our ERGs to have something where you have expert advice, and then you have team member experiences, then you have open Q&A, and then it leads to more education and ongoing dialogue. It's not easy, and it's emotional. It's been uncomfortable, but boy, it's been part of the healing process.
Yeah, great question, Susan and Tracy. Speaking of communication, it's really, my approach is seek to understand, and it starts with listening, and really take the time and listen to their background, upbringing, experience, and try to walk in their shoes. Being a few weeks old in my new role, as the first AAPI CEO of this very celebrated organization, I'm on a listening tour, listening to our national office team members, to our affiliated councils, to our number one customer, which is MBEs, and to our key stakeholder, which is corporate members, and our partners like National ACE. And seek to understand and look at the situation from their perspective. And this requires that all of us are open-minded and show respect and really make them feel safe and supported, to Tracy's point.
I like the point that, Tracy, you made around intentionality, like being intentional. Like, we are human beings, so we're naturally inclined to kind of, seek people who are like us, or, whether it's how they look or where they're from, or, the whole host of things. But intention means that we're going to pause that and say, let me make sure and put a check on myself and my environment, that we're actually truly open. And then, Ying, to your point, the openness is around listening, making sure you are hearing others and therefore learning about others. And to me, that allows the connections that override maybe some of the stereotypes and some of the things that get in the way of us seeing each other as people. So I really think those two pieces of advice are really on point. Now, my next area of questions are around AAPIs in particular. Is there a unique AAPI approach to DEI that you think we need to be aware of? Are there different things that leaders and organizations need to be mindful of as they seek to address DEI when it comes to AAPI employees, customers, stakeholders? And talk about the concept of the bamboo ceiling, which a number of us have heard about. Is that a real thing? Is there a unique ceiling that AAPIs encounter? I'd love to hear what you each think of that. And I'm gonna switch it around a little. I'll start with you, Ying.
Okay, great. I think culture sometimes put a team member to a either disadvantaged position or advantageous position, and it can cause team members to be misunderstood. As Asian American, stepped into corporate America in 2000. My experience, yes, bamboo ceiling was there. And, as you know, my upbringing and many of yours is that we're supposed to be humble. We're not supposed to brag about our achievements. And so I worked very hard and didn't talk about my achievements. Then I realized in corporate America, outspoken culture prevail. And so I was sitting there, working very hard, and many promotions passed to me. And I realized that, since I'm in this country and I'm in corporate America's culture, I have to transform myself. So I had to transform myself from being reserved for being outspoken. And boy, I was glad to find my voice. You can tell now, I'm very outspoken. So I think, the key lessons is, as API, you have to transform yourself to fitting a certain culture, a corporate culture.
So Tracy, seeing you now, maybe you were like that as well at some point in your career. You're not like that now. You're assertive and confident. You're somebody to look up to. Both of you are. But I'm wondering, as leaders, to Ying's point, do we need to be conscious about the cultures, about the different ways people show up at work? And as leaders, make sure we're intentionally including everyone, including APIs. How do you see that?
No, absolutely. And I think that there's probably a bit of education that needs to be required. And I think the silver lining of the recent challenges of anti-Asian hate and the surge has opened up the conversation to have an understanding of different cultures and letting people have those uncomfortable conversations as a leader. So I'll share, Susan, that I've taken the opportunity to really partner with Artesia, Toyota's Asian ERG, and really try to partner with the leaders of those groups, because it isn't easy, right? To bring up the fact that this has been hard and that maybe there needs to be more focus on the development of their leadership skills. Because to Ying's point, maybe it isn't a natural thing to be able to be confident in their speaking, in their interpersonal skills, to have tough conversations. And so I'm really happy that our Toyota HR team is investing in the development of leaders and putting together culturally sensitive programs, because that's important to recognize that everybody's not going to be the most gregarious person out there putting themselves in the forefront. We need to be able to walk in other people's shoes, and maybe something like a reverse mentoring helps. Also, not feeling like we are only looking for mentors that look like ourselves, because while the bamboo ceiling is real, it's also important to recognize that we each bring different strengths to the table. And through that diversity of thought, we can have richer outcomes. So more work to be done. But I look at this recent situation as one where we've opened up more doors.
I like the idea of allyship. We're all in this together. So the idea that, we need to teach others, but others also need to have an openness and a willingness to learn. and together we can do it. And I remember when I was, SJD 1.0, and I wasn't speaking up in rooms, I had a white male boss who took me aside and said, "Why are you not talking? You are an expert. You need to speak up." And it took that. It took the leader noticing me and saying, "I expect more from you, and I know you can do it," to bring me out of my shell. Yang, to your point, so that I can start to speak and engage and I can feel supported. But it was, he believed in me. It took both. It took the leader to open up that door and create that environment. So my next area of questions are really around business. So DEI is a great thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And I come from a perspective that you just do it because it's the right thing to do. But if that's not good enough, why do you both think that DEI is good for business? How is it good for business? Why should we care about DEI? Why should we not make it a side gig, but make it a primary gig and embed it in our business plans? Ying, you want to go first?
Sure. I was reading some statistics around the importance of diversity in the workplace. And there was a stats that about 70% of diverse companies are better positioned to capture new markets. So economically, definitely makes sense. You're going to see tons of data there, and data is a power. And on the performance wise, I witnessed definitely companies with racial diversity perform better. And I think data capture 35%. Companies with racial diversity, they can perform 35% better and increased ROI. So the performance wise, I witnessed, it will help a company to perform better. And then the other thing, it's a front and center, which is social justice and social equity. When you lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it leads to and has led to unfair conditions for marginalized populations, and who will be worse off. And we've been seeing it, especially the last few years. And so nonprofit organizations such as NMSDC and National ACE, we were really created to improve economic representation of minority-owned businesses and drive an inclusive economy for our nation. And so I'm wanting to use this platform to encourage corporate America and government agencies really to partner with nonprofit organizations like National ACE, like NMSDC, to make sure that our country is most diverse and inclusion country in the world.
Great points around the fact that there is unfair conditions that get created if we don't have DEI in mind, and that businesses aren't going to run as well. So Tracy, how can you add on that?
Well, when you think about the changing landscape, right, of how our nation will evolve, and the minority will not be the minority going forward, and how AAPI are the fastest growing population out there, when Total looks at our customer base and the future segmentation, that's what we're trying to address, right? And so we're looking at this from our customer base. We're trying to increase our minority support for our dealer body, because when you walk into a dealership, you want to be greeted with someone who actually understands your culture from a buying experience or language. Those things are important. And from a supplier perspective, it really trying to lift opportunities where we can have our tier one suppliers support and mentor those that are coming up. I'm proud to say that Toyota spends $3 billion annually with diverse suppliers and is contracting with over 300 minority-owned and women-owned suppliers on the direct procurement side on the supply chain. There's more that we can do, and that's why the partnership with MSDC and National ACE are things that can help us learn more, that we can grow. But for all of us, and we also spoke earlier, Susan, about the war on talent, we all recognize DE&I is just smart business. And that's why I don't like to look at it as a separate HR initiative, right? We're much more effective if all of our executive team are accountable to weave it into everything that we do. And that's where the success is going to come from.
So if you're a business owner and you're an AAPI business owner, what would you say to that business owner that gives that person the edge in business? Is there an AAPI edge that can be put out there? We talked about, don't limit yourself. Don't be caught into the model minority myth, which is really weaponizing us against other minority groups. Let's be honest. But is there an AAPI benefit? Is there something that you should be doing differently or more so because you're an AAPI business owner?
Yeah, so the edge, that's a great question. I don't know if it's edge for AAPI businesses, but for minority-owned businesses, it's innovation, creative ideas, way of doing business, and not just innovative product services. It's how you approach your strategy, how you approach your customer. So it's really, innovation and agile, I would say would be the edge.
I would say drawing from deep cultures that are diverse cultural backgrounds is an edge, right? And it could be if you're doing a service and you look at what is the cool factor, that certainly is something that people can bring. But I also would say from a problem solving perspective, that is an edge, right? We've all got this rich history of innovation, problem solving, continuous improvement. And in this world of wanting to have stronger exposure for DE&I, I'll give you an example, Susan. Toyota has a philosophy of Mendomi, treating team members like family. That's a cultural aspect, but it can be a competitive edge as well. So I'll leave you with that.
Well, and I was going to say that, I think that the fact we're so family oriented has made us very conscious of the greater good. And so I like to tell AAPIs that's a strength because you can build team. You can bring people together because you know what that looks like. You've been doing that since you were a baby. You just need to remember that and translate it over to the business world. Now, we only have room for a little bit more time with you, unfortunately, because I could talk to you for hours. But I'd like you to complete this sentence. For those who are looking up to the two of you and saying, I want to be her someday, I want you to tell the audience, I got to where I got to because fill in the blank.
I took risks, put myself out there, and took chances to grow and to learn. And all of you can do that.
Because when I went through the mountains of obstacles, I didn't give up. And I learned from my mistakes.
And I would say that I always took the yuck projects. I took the projects that maybe unknowingly that they were this hard that nobody wanted. And I thought maybe that's an opportunity for me to stick out. Well, it's been such a pleasure to talk with the two of you. You both are people I look up to and I look for when I don't know what to do. And I know the audience has gained a lot from this conversation. DEI is good for business. DEI is good for the world. DEI is good for making this a better place. DEI is good for individuals because we can use each other, work together for the better of all of us. So thank you very much for joining us in this panel, and we appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you, Tracy and Ying, for an amazing conversation on DEI. We have learned so much from you, and there are many actionable things you are leaving us with. Now I'm honored to introduce Dante Smalls, Vice President of Global Public Affairs at UPS, for his remarks.
Well, that was just such an amazing discussion with some very accomplished leaders. And I want to thank Susan Davis for just a very impressive tour de force of some very critical issues affecting the AAPI community, but more broadly, the community at large. We heard a lot of amazing tones and themes that were hit throughout this, whether we were talking about how to create community, how to inspire innovation and passion, and how to ensure that people reach their full potential. I can't impress upon you enough how National ACE has just really brought these incredible discussions to the forefront. And UPS is honored to be a part of those discussions. As we look at the issues and look at some of the model myths that are being perpetrated out throughout this society and discussion, I think having these accomplished leaders talk about those topics and address them have been very important. You know, as I think about some of my own personal interactions and working with National ACE, I realize just the presence that they have in the organization, whether it's working on legislation to ensure that anti-Asian hate does not occur in our country anywhere, or whether it's ensuring that small businesses have the opportunities and access to the American dream. We're very proud to partner with them, and I look forward to continued discussions with National ACE and these accomplished leaders. And I hope that the conference, which has been just a great success, continues with our support and others throughout the coming years.
Please welcome United Healthcare's National Vice President for Asian Initiatives, Mr. Chris Law.
Hi, I'm Chris Law, National Vice President at United Healthcare, and we are proud partners of National ACE. At United Healthcare, we are dedicated to helping people live healthier lives and making the health system work better for everyone. As we come together to fight this COVID-19 pandemic, it is important for us to understand more about the vaccines and learn about basic prevention measures. National ACE has partnered with the Department of Health and Human Services and the We Can Do This campaign to get our community back on track. Please take a look at this video produced by Golden Catalyst in partnership with Master Chef Martin Yan and AAPI community leaders nationwide. Together, we can do this and put an end to the pandemic.
Hi, I'm Chef Martin Yan of Yan Can Cook. I may not be a big shot, but I know the best shot we can have today is the COVID-19 vaccine. It is safe and is effective. It is the best shot that we have to fight against COVID-19, especially severe illness and death. Come on, folks. The battle against COVID-19 is far from over. Protect yourself, your family, and your community. Get your shots. I did.
My name is Dr. Karen Ng, and I am the chairwoman of the National Asian and Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship based in Washington, D.C.
我的名是 Victor Lau， 我是 Serai 叫 Kapitan 的经理，那里 Chicago, Illinois.
안녕하세요. 네바다주 정신건강기획 및 자문위원회 위원 김진주라고 합니다.
Xin chào mọi người. Việt là chủ nhà hàng The Recess Room in Fountain Valley, California.
私は中野メガンです。私は Asian American Chamber of Commerce of Illinois の代表です。
大家好，我是美国非营利慈善组织 ICCA International Creative Class Alliance 国际创意教育交流基金会的总监 Charlie.
Hello, my name is Sue-Ann Hong, and I'm the president and CEO for the Center for Asian Pacific American Women. I'm here in the beautiful Atlanta, Georgia.
Olivia Vassing Ho, the Executive Director in Yataho, California Hmong Chamber of Commerce, Luhabao, Yataho, Fresno, California.
Ako si Noel Umega, Vice President of Membership ng Federation of Philippine American Chambers of Commerce. Nandito po ako sa Los Angeles, California.
We can do this.
와랑 쪼레디오.
우리는 할 수 있습니다.
간바루.
我们一定能做到。
We can do this.
Kaya natin gawin to.
We can do this all together. If Yan can, so can you. Please visit www.vaccines.gov.
Thanks, Chef Martin Yan, Ms. Jenny Lo, our AAPI Chamber presidents and executives who are a part of the We Can Do This initiative. National ACE currently has more than 70 affiliate AAPI chamber and partners throughout the country. Together, we develop programs, initiatives, and distribute grants to all AAPI business owners. Please join us as a part of our National ACE family. Check our website, at nationalace.org. I also want to thank all of you for participating and watching our conference now. We have seen a lot of friends, supporters register. Thank you. We cannot achieve our mission without your support. Please invite more of your colleagues to join us for the rest of the conference. We also want to thank our corporate partners. They have helped tremendously to support our AAPI Strong program and initiatives. Now I would like to introduce you our close partner from Walmart, Michelle Mee. She is a Vice President of Emerging Markets and Business Development, Walmart Global Sourcing. Michelle and her team support a wide range of new sourcing initiatives, including cross-border trade, India Flipkart e-commerce sourcing, and the wholesale business. These initiatives play a key role in Walmart global sourcing transformation and contribute to and reinforce Walmart's everyday low cost, everyday low price, which help customers to save money, live better. Michelle is a true leader. She has a 20-year veteran with extensive experience in retail, finance, strategy, supply chain, and sourcing. Let us welcome Michelle Mee.
Thank you, Chilin, for the introduction. I'm both humbled and excited to join this group and share perspectives on how the AAPI community fights against racism and the roles corporations play in supporting AAPI now and going forward. Times like these are unprecedented. 2020 was a year of losses. Lives have been lost around the world due to COVID-19. 2020 saw the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others, as well as a big surge of hate crimes targeting people of Asian descent, and that continued into 2021. Asians in America are now facing a dual pandemic, a heightened fear of racist abuse on top of all the worries caused by COVID-19. The AAPI communities around the nation have fought back. Rallies were held across the country to protest anti-Asian violence. Solidarity with other vulnerable communities has been strengthened to fight against racism together. Nonprofit organizations such as National ACE and other advocacy organizations have conducted countless training sessions and webinars to support AAPI small businesses. In April this year, thousands of Asian American business leaders from Walmart, Google, Zoom, Pizza Hut, and others committed $10 million to AAPI organizations fighting racism. I believe the response was strong and the voices were loud. Following overwhelming support from both chambers of Congress, President Biden signed legislation in May that addresses hate crimes throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, with particular emphasis on the increase in violence against Asian Americans. But we mustn't stop. And the fight against racism is a journey, not a sprint. I think corporations in America should continue to play a critical role in racial equity. Here at Walmart, the size of workforce in the US gives us an incredible opportunity to be a role model for diversity and inclusion, and a great responsibility too. I feel we should continue to look for talent internally and take steps to ensure the diversity of hiring teams and candidate slates. I know Walmart offers racial equity training via the Racial Equity Institute. As you will see from our mid-year CDEI report on corporate.walmart.com, we are very transparent about our progress. This goes beyond regular reporting to striving to regularly make space for conversations about inequity. Being a part of authentic conversation where all of us can speak up, be heard, and hear from others. I know this is not necessarily easy, especially if you come from a cultural background that doesn't elevate activism, and if you have had to work hard to fit in the culture here. But it is vital. As a first-generation immigrant, I'm learning how to find my own voice and use it to fight racism. Let me conclude my remarks by sharing one of my favorite quotes from Gandhi, who said, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." I would encourage all of us to face the many issues head on and hold hands to not only be the change, but also lead the change that we wish to see in the world. Thank you.
Please welcome Dr. Eugenia Henry, President of H2O Clinical and Commissioner for Maryland Commission for Women, to introduce Senator Ben Cardin.
As a small business owner in Maryland, it is my great honor to introduce our next speaker. Senator Ben Cardin is the senior senator from Maryland, a seat he has held since 2007. He previously served in the U.S. Representative for Maryland's 3rd Congressional District from 1987 to 2007. Senator Cardin also previously served as a member of the Maryland House of Delegates from 1967 to 1987, and as a Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates from 1979 to 1987, the youngest person in history to hold this position. Senator Cardin is the chair of the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. As a leader in this committee, he helped write the Paycheck Protection Program that has helped to many AAPI small businesses in Maryland and nationwide. Whether the economic repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. In May of this year, National ACE hosted an event with Senator Cardin where he listened intently to the concerns of AAPI business owners and provided detailed information on the federal resources available to AAPI businesses in need. Senator Cardin has been a long-time champion of the AAPI community. We are happy to welcome him at our conference today. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Ben Cardin.
Hi, I'm Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, Chairman of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. I am honored to join you at the National Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. I want to thank you for your advocacy and partnership over the past year and a half as Congress has worked to respond to the pandemic. I am proud of the programs we implemented to support small businesses through this unprecedented and harrowing experience. And I continue to be impressed by the resilience and ingenuity of America's small businesses. At this moment, our nation is showing signs of a record-setting economic recovery. You must ensure that reaches all communities. President Joe Biden's Build Back Better agenda gives us a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make our economy work for everyone. Along with the American Rescue Plan enacted in March, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the Build Back Better budget that is making its way through Congress will invest $25 billion in small businesses over the next 10 years and directly address the barriers that prevent women, minorities, and other underserved individuals from starting businesses. I am proud to share that the infrastructure bill includes my amendment to make permanent and expand the Minority Business Development Agency, which I know has been a long-time goal of the National ACE. MBDA is one of the federal government's best tools to address the historic and pervasive barriers to minority small business ownership. My home state of Maryland is fortunate to have 2 MBDA centers, a business center in the Capital Region and an advanced manufacturing center in Baltimore. I have seen firsthand the benefits of MBDA programs to minority entrepreneurs. My amendment will extend the geographic reach of MBDAs into even more communities, increase its grant-making capacity, and strengthen its ties with HBCUs, minority-serving institutions, and other community organizations to create more regional MBDA offices. This measure, along with the other small business initiatives in the Build Back Better agenda, will help minority entrepreneurs reach their full potential and help turn historically underserved communities into hubs of entrepreneurship and innovation. I am confident that with your combined partnership, we can make that happen. Thank you again for inviting me today. I look forward to when we can gather safely in person in the future. Stay well.
Join us tomorrow for a special panel conversation on AAPIs in a post-COVID economy. Please welcome the Chief Operating Officer of National ACE, Mr. Daniel Oliver.
Hello, everyone. Since our founding in 2012, our goal has been clear: to improve the economic and social well-being of the AAPI community. By working with policymakers, business leaders, and public and private stakeholders, we have advocated for public policies that promote growth and provide AAPIs with more successful business and economic opportunities. As we have in years past, I'm pleased to present National ACE's 2021 policy agenda. This year's agenda largely focuses on the impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on AAPI businesses and communities, and emphasizes their needs to Congress, the White House, and to state and local lawmakers. In doing so, it's our hope that we can collaborate and find equitable solutions to address the unprecedented challenges facing our community. Our policy agenda includes discussions on critical issues facing the AAPI community and offers common sense solutions that should be considered by political and business leaders. It is imperative to the well-being of our communities that there are AAPI voices present at the table, and this policy agenda serves as a tool to do so. As lawmakers and business leaders begin to shift gears toward the recovery, the contributions of the AAPI business community must be part of the conversation. Our community and economic strength continue to remain steadfast despite an unprecedented pandemic, economic downturn, and a sharp spike in xenophobic attacks against AAPIs. We stand ready to engage in these policy discussions. And with that, I'm happy to introduce our next panel for a discussion on National ACE's 2021 policy agenda. I have with me three amazing individuals. Jimmy Ferguson is a small business owner who has owned and operated McDonald's restaurants in Central Texas for about 30 years. He's currently the chair of the Asian McDonald's Operators Association. He's a founding board member of National ACE, and he serves as the chair of National ACE's Policy Committee. Madeleine Milka is a nationally recognized civil rights leader and a member of USA Today's inaugural Leaders of Change. She serves as the president and CEO of the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies, also known as APEX, and is the founder and principal of Aram Group, LLC. She brings nearly 25 years of experience working in political campaigns and specializes in political and nonprofit fundraising and political training. And Seema Agnani is the executive director of National Capacity. She has nearly 20 years of experience working in the community development and immigrant rights sectors, focusing primarily on the challenges of providing housing, economic opportunity, and supporting systems for new immigrants. And under her leadership, National Capacity has done some amazing work supporting AAPI small businesses since the beginning of this global pandemic. Thank you all for being here today to discuss National ACE's policy priorities. First, I'll turn to Jimmy. Jimmy, in this year's policy agenda, National ACE had the unique challenge of addressing both the COVID-19 pandemic and the alarming levels of AAPI hate that have occurred over the last year and a half. Can you talk a little bit about how this policy agenda addresses both of these issues and as well as their impact on AAPI small businesses?
Well, thanks for the question, Daniel. The last year and a half has been really painful for our community. You know, as you have alluded to, two AAPI have been faced with both COVID-19 and with AAPI hate at the same time. And we have learned what AAPI really hate is, and especially to our in the nation, in that in March of this year, 8 women of Asian descent was gunned down in Atlanta, Georgia in March. And this brought attention to the entire nation. What we are doing is really important for our policy agenda to confront the AAPI hate. By placing more focus and placing a pressure really on our leaders in our government and the corporations, and within our communication to condemn the AAPI hate. The National ACE has also launched the AAPI Strong campaign, to combat that AAPI hate. Together with our corporate and nonprofit partners, we are standing up against the racial biases, discrimination, and the fear that has plagued our business community for the last 2 years. Through this campaign, we are hoping and we are helping organizations to implement AAPI biases and culture sensitivity type of training and programs to help the business owners and the entrepreneurs to mitigate the biases that we are experiencing and to improve our business and workplace outreach. Each section of our policy agenda was written within the context of the COVID pandemic. It touches the AAPI small business, also including what is taking place with the hate that's been happening. So that we are focusing, Daniel, on both pandemics, the COVID-19 and the AAPI hate.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. And Madeline, our policy agenda also covers a wide range of priority areas for the AAPI community, including access to capital, equity and digital broadband, and we try to tie that together as to how these policy areas can lead to greater equity overall. Can you talk a little bit about how this kind of information can be translated into policy, and more specifically, how Congress leans on this type of information when they create policy?
Well, thank you, Daniel and National ACE, for this opportunity to talk with you, and to my fellow panelists for sharing all of your expertise and insight. Your question is really pertinent because advocacy from a community or constituency perspective helps to bring a more dynamic discussion on what it means to be a member of the AA and HPI community. So lived experiences in all of its diversity allows policymakers to have a different lens to see how public policy affects different constituencies. If policies are only being made with one community in mind, then the policies aren't taking the different experiences into account in finding solutions that are equitable for all. And so when you think about this in terms of the work that National ACE is doing, it's really bringing in small business owners, entrepreneurs, and people who have different lived experiences, regardless of their constituency, whether they live in a rural or urban area, have employees that they are staffing in their different types of businesses, whether it's a storefront or e-commerce. And so all of these different types of small business owners really have different experiences. And so when you also look to Congress to think about how policies are being made, they need to think about how it affects all these different types of people. So participating in a congressional town hall or advocating to your elected leaders really helps to highlight these challenges and the gaps that need to be addressed. And so, being able to participate in a way that showcases your challenges and also all the positive things that might come out from accessing resources that the government has created to address these needs really shows what works and what doesn't.
Right. And I think that's so important. And all of us are advocate for the API community in one way or in another. And so Seema, as the executive director of National Capacity, you're well aware of the power of grassroots advocacy. Can you talk a little bit about how an organization's policy agenda can be part of an advocate's toolkit?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, and want to echo the thanks for convening us to talk about these important issues. I think, national capacity works in partnership with its members that are local organizations across the country working in these communities. And, the policy agenda that ACE put forth really includes a lot of the same priorities of our coalition, issues like data disaggregation, access to capital. There are ways to engage on these issues on the local, state, and federal level. In the current moment, advocates can engage on data disaggregation, particularly in the coming period. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is embarking on a process where they're going to figure out what lending data is available and in what racial subgroups are tracked in that. And so it's a top priority for national capacity alongside ACE to push for disaggregated data so we can have a better picture of what our communities look like. So, whether it's as individuals or as organizations, we can all engage in that process that's coming very soon. Another current area that's being debated in Congress, the infrastructure bill will bring resources to local communities, hopefully. And so people can engage locally. As those resources are deployed, we need to make sure Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are participating in community engagement processes and local planning processes, so that we can make sure our communities and the cultural districts that we hold dear, the Chinatowns, the Little Tokyo, across the country, that we're able to not only preserve those neighborhoods, but ensure that they thrive and continue to grow. And so there's a lot people can do on all levels of government, and a lot of these issues are being debated at all levels at this moment.
Right. And Seema, again, thank you so much for the work that National Capacity does. You guys are so embedded in the community with providing in-language resources, and the work you've done for small businesses throughout this pandemic has just been so admirable. Jimmy, I know that a lot of people looking from the outside in have misconceptions about AAPIs and AAPI business owners specifically. Can you talk about how these misconceptions have affected the policy discussion around providing assistance for AAPIs?
You're absolutely correct. There is misconceptions that all AAPIs are doing well, and not, and they don't need assistance or relief in the same way that other minority groups do. I don't think that I need to go in depth on the concept of model minority myth, which in short is the idea that all AAPIs are successful, due to their high rate of college degree, medium household income, which is higher than the national average. Now, it's true that many of the AAPIs are successful. To treat the entire community and place them in one bucket that they are all successful is not correct, and really it's not fair. And that highest earning AAPIs make as much as 10 times more than the lowest earning AAPIs. Now, AAPI is the most economic divided racial group in the U.S. The AAPI has created, to a certain extent, that this misunderstanding has created some misunderstanding, and that we do not need the support, do not need resources as the other groups. Now, this can hurt this because we need to be able to influence the policymakers who develops the legislature to support the minority groups. And in many cases that they're saying that this group doesn't need the resources or support that's needed. Back, I believe almost a year ago, there was a survey that was conducted by the National ACE, U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Black Chamber and reimage Main Street. And what we found was that majority of the AAPI entrepreneurs and the business owners did not even apply for the pandemic relief because, they did not believe that they qualify for the aid. And meaning that more could have done to reach the AAPI communities. The members of the Congress and the private sectors, they need to hear from us. They need to hear from our community, our business community, and the national groups, and providing the best support that we can to AAPIs.
Right, and thanks, Jimmy. And I think you're exactly right. What we saw since the onset of the pandemic is that minority businesses particularly were disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and AAPI business owners were no different. In fact, in many cases, were the most affected by the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Madeline, I wanted to turn to you and talk a little bit about AAPI women, because AAPI women have suffered suffered high rates of long-term unemployment during the pandemic, and generally from our surveys, we found have been generally less optimistic about the future of their businesses post-pandemic than their male counterparts. Do you have a sense as to why AAPI women have experienced this hardship, or if there are any solutions at the policy level?
Well, I think echoing what Jimmy's already stated is very important in that data disaggregation of our communities, because, in 2021, the National Women's Law Center did a survey basically looking at AAPI women in the workforce. And they saw, for an example, that a Burmese American woman was making 52 cents for every dollar that a white non-Hispanic male was making, while a Japanese American woman was making 95 cents. And so that data disaggregation really just shows, in the sense within our community, what the constituencies are facing in their challenges. When you think about also the fact that there are less than 3% of AAPI women who are venture funded, that access to capital is just already diminished as a woman. And then you filter that down a little bit more to the fact that you're talking about, an Asian American woman. The pandemic itself really highlighted that the work performed by AAPI women has always been undervalued. And then you think about the gender wage gap. And the pandemic only increased those effects. So it was already a compounded issue. And so when you think about the fact that there is an aggregate of lost wages, there's already something that a woman is facing because of the fact that she's getting paid less than her counterparts. This adds up, in your livelihoods and how it affects your family. So I think this is so important for the community to understand that it is so important for our voices to be heard, to bring awareness to policymakers so that they understand exactly the challenges that AAPI women face, and so that they have a better understanding, again, of, we're starting off not at an equitable footing. And so through time, it only just increases that wage gap. So I think this is a part of where it's important for individuals who are experiencing this to use their voice and to talk about this just like they would in any other situation, to allow them to really give examples of why support needs to be created for our communities.
Right. I think that's so true. And so AAPIs in general have had a hard time accessing resources, AAPI women especially. And SEMA, as you know, there's not only the pandemic, but there's this consistent rise in attacks against the AAPI community and the xenophobic incidences that have happened, which came to the national spotlight earlier in the year. Though what we've seen is that while the attacks and the incidents have not gone away, the media attention kind of has. And so what can we do to make sure that that everyone continues to pay attention to this, even because the problem's not going away?
Yeah, thank you for raising this important question. You know, I think when the rise in hate incidences first began, I couldn't help going back to my experiences in working in the South Asian community post 9/11, when the Muslim community was under attack, and so many lessons learned from that experience. And, you know, similarly, the communities rallied around the Muslim community at that time, but soon it dissipated. And I think, you know, really what happened after 9/11 and where we are today is that our community built a lot of infrastructure. We connected our organizations, and are able to move together in a way that we weren't before, right? And so even the partnerships that we've set up since the onset of the pandemic are really critical so that we can collectively keep the pressure on to address issues of hate. And, we know these are not simple policy solutions. How do you solve for hate, right? You can report hate crimes, you can teach people how to respond, but really what we need is a cultural shift in this country. And, that takes time, and that requires us to build with other communities of color as well, right? So I think if we have this vision of a multiracial society for this country, it's going to require us to do that work as well in terms of building with Black leadership, Latino leadership, and also continue to raise this issue as we engage with our partners and other communities. I think this is long-term work we have to do. And unfortunately, it's going to be up to our communities to keep raising the issue of increases in hate violence against our communities and remind people of this time of what happened. Thankfully, we're not getting terrible rhetoric from leadership in this country that's perpetuating it. At least that has lessened. But we're hearing of incidences every day still, and much of it is happening within the small business community, as we know. And so there's a lot we can do to continue to raise awareness, and also ask our colleagues to step in partnership with us.
Right. And I think that's exactly right. And again, Seema, thank you for everything you do at National Capacity. Madeline as well, everything you do at Apex. And Jimmy, thanks so much for being on this panel with us today. And look forward to talking with everyone more about these important issues. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome Donald Yung Kilbasa, Managing Partner of Kilbasa Homes and Ansong.
Good afternoon. My name is Donald Yung Kilbasa. I'm an actor, martial artist, lawyer, CPA, and an Asian American small business owner. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Representative Amada Radowagan was elected as American Samoa's third member of Congress on November 4th, 2014. She is the first woman to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives from American Samoa. She's the first Republican woman of Samoan descent in Congress and the highest elected official as an Asian Pacific Republican office holder. Congresswoman Amada serves on the House Veterans Affairs Committee in a senior role as a vice-ranking member of the full committee, as well as two of its subcommittees. The Subcommittee on Health, along with the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. She's been involved in promoting democracy and fighting for women's and minorities' rights since the beginning of her career and helping build democratic institutions abroad. Please welcome the Honorable Amada Radowagan.
Ta'alofa, ta'alofa, lava. Thank you to the National Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, and your many affiliated organizations and businesses, and my friend, Ms. Chiling Tong. It's always a privilege to speak to some of those who are doing more to build our economy than almost anyone. Our small business leaders, entrepreneurs, business innovators, and those taking an extra interest in serving the business community in leadership. Our Asian and Pacific Islander American communities are strengthened by examples of success and opportunity. Since Asian Americans as a whole are the fastest growing portion of the U.S. population, we can keep working for similar growth in our business community in years to come. And with that, growth in our broader responsibilities. The United States needs economic growth like never before. COVID-19 led to trillions in federal spending, some necessary, some debatable. Record national debt, record federal spending, inflation concerns. These are some of the facts we face. It led to many small business closings and new debt for even many healthy businesses. I think the government was right in some measures, such as low interest loans, some forgivable. Now, we need good small business ideas and best practices to lead the way like never before. Our nation is strong and resilient, and we can be confident in our economy. And the people that do so much to make it work for us all, our local business communities. Most of all, I want to say thank you for your role in that. You lead the way in creating jobs and economic growth. In the long run, everything we expect from government, from military strength to supporting healthcare and education, it all starts with the economy. So the government should be wise and constrained with its powers of regulation and taxation. We look to small businesses like yours for an economy that is energetic, problem-solving, creative, and understands the needs of the people and community. So congratulations on all you do and the many ways your business community has come back after all the events of 2020, from lockdowns to outrageous acts of violence against Asian Americans. I know recovery and change can seem slow and involve hard work, but I trust we're weathering the worst of it and returning to plans for long-term growth. If you ever need anything related to Congress, contact my office or be sure to let me know of legislation that is important to you. I wish your conference every success. God bless our small businesses and the United States of America. Soy Fua Maia Manuia.
Please welcome the President of Island Liaison, Ms. Claudia Kircher.
Half a day. My name is Claudia de Leon Guerrero Fajardo Kircher of Chamorro Filipino descent from the Mariana Archipelago, founder and president of the Island Liaison located in Phoenix, Arizona. Our organization advocates for education and awareness of the freely associated states of the Pacific Islanders to our community. We serve as a resource for educational and cultural enrichment and health and government services locally to Pacific Islander community. I'm so proud to be an affiliate of National ACE because they have helped bring us into the digital world with their virtual technical assistance and have given us generous grants to help keep our programs with their AAPI Strong initiative. Now, I have the honor and privilege to introduce Crystal Ka'ai, who is the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Her responsibilities include coordinating the federal government's response into anti-Asian violence and discrimination, while also increasing representation and opportunities for those communities. Ms. Ka'ai previously served as an executive director of CAPAC, which is a Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus and has an extensive history on AAPI advocacy. She is the first person of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander descent to fill this leadership position. CAPAC is composed of members of the U.S. Congress who are of Asian and Pacific Islander heritage, as well as Congress members who have a strong dedication to promoting the well-being of Asian American and Pacific Islander AAPI community. Crystal rose to her position in 2013 from her previous policy advisory and assistant coordinator role with CAPAC, and also her work with now retired Senator Daniel Akaka of Hawaii. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Crystal Ka'ai.
Aloha mai kako. Thank you so much to the National Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship for inviting me to take part in your legislative conference. I especially want to thank your incredible leader, Chiling Tong, and dedicated National Board Chair, Dr. Karen Ng, for their unwavering commitment to advancing opportunity for millions of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander entrepreneurs and business owners across the nation. I had the honor to work very closely with National ACE during my time as the Executive Director of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, and it is a privilege to be able to continue our partnership together in my new role as the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, or what we call WIONP. And this partnership is more important now than ever as our community continues to face a multitude of crises due to the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the alarming spike in anti-Asian xenophobia and violence this pandemic has incited. We know that AANHPI businesses make significant contributions to American society, including producing the largest receipts out of any minority group at $863.3 billion annually, as well as employing more than 5 million people nationwide. And our businesses will be vital to our nation's economic recovery as we reemerge from the pandemic and people get back to work. So to all of the entrepreneurs, small business owners, and chambers that have joined us today, I want you to know that the Biden administration cares deeply about our community. That's why in May, the president signed Executive Order 14031, advancing equity, justice, and opportunity for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. This executive order established the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it delivers on the president's commitment to reinstate and reinvigorate this historic initiative. It also authorized the creation of the President's Advisory Commission on AANHPIs, as well as an interagency working group and regional network of federal officials that will help to facilitate improved communication, engagement, and coordination between the federal government and AANHPI communities throughout the United States. And just last month, the president and vice president held a meeting in the White House with over a dozen AANHPI leaders, including National ACE's very own Chiling Tong, who emphasized the importance of ensuring that AANHPI businesses were included in ongoing economic relief and recovery efforts. WIONP is laser focused on advancing equity on behalf of the AANHPI community through an ambitious whole-of-government response to addressing the many challenges impacting our community. This includes focusing on policies to address and end anti-Asian bias, xenophobia, and racism, as well as COVID-19 economic recovery efforts through programs and resources administered through the Small Business Administration, the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. Department of Treasury, and more. Our work also includes prioritizing greater data disaggregation, language access, and cultural competency to improve the quality of life and opportunities for AANHPIs across the nation. So thank you again to National ACE for the invitation to join you today. I look forward to working together to ensure that our community has robust support from the federal government and to building a brighter future for generations to come.
What an inspiring and compelling day of conversations and presentations we have had on the important topic of finding our voices. We hope that you take away learnings from today and apply them to your daily lives as individuals, businesses, and community activists. Rise up and raise your voice. It is urgent that we get activated. You can make a difference, and together we can change the course of history to one where all will be fully represented and all will benefit from the vast largesse of this great country. Thank you to National ACE, our esteemed speakers, sponsors, and participants for a great day of learning and inspiration. We welcome you to participate in the third day of our conference, where we will hear exciting speakers such as SBA Administrator Isabella Guzman and YouTube co-founder Stephen Chen. And please do continue to engage with National ACE. Thank you.